Hello and happy Wednesday to our Blazer Nation showing up this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. You're tuned in right now to our live Mission Fuel Wednesday broadcast with myself, Stephen A. Hart, and my amazing partner in these Willionaire Wednesdays, Mr. Shawn Dove. Listen, if you're not familiar with me, I'm a marketer, podcaster, content creator, brand strategist, entrepreneur, husband, best dad ever, Jamaican with a dozen other titles. You can learn more about me over at stephenahart.com and connect with me on Twitter. I'm at Stephen A. Hart, pretty much everywhere. Now, I see a couple folks hopping on. If this is your first time joining one of our live streams, we just want to say thank you so much for being here, and we encourage you to say a quick hello in the comments. Tell us where it is that you're connecting with us from. If you're not in the mood to type too much, you can give us, one of these emojis with the wave and maybe the flag. If you're in a different country, wherever you're repping, let us know. Let me go ahead and welcome to the stage my dear brother, Mr. Shawn Dove. He's a speaker, he's an author, he's an advocate for leaders who want to improve the lives of young people, specifically Black men and boys. He's the co-author of the upcoming book, I Too Am America. What's not in his bio is he is a master connector, and he is bringing us all together at all times. Good morning, Brother Dove.
Good morning, my brother Stephen. Great to be here for another Willionaire Wednesday, Mission Fuel
Yes.
Wednesday. And I just want to say thank you for sharing your Trailblazer platform with me. And I am just so excited about today's episode. And for folks that don't know, what are they talking about? Mission Fuel, right? We're all on a mission, right? And Mission Fuel is the connection, it's the inspiration, it is that which gives you power
Mm.
keep on keeping on, right? And I was just sharing every time I hear that opening theme of Trailblazers, that gives me mission fuel. And mission fuel is a word, it can be a song, but most of all, for me, mission fuel comes through relationships and connections that I have with people in my life, and I'm thrilled to introduce two of them. Let's not hold back and let's like bring them to the stage. We have my good brother Joe Jones that is in the house, and Mike Dorsey. And today's theme and topic is, what can the world learn from Black fathers now?
Mm.
And this is a free flowing format. And so I want to welcome Joe and Mike, and love them both dearly. And I'm going to just allow them to introduce themselves, right? And Stephen, I love the way that you described the many jobs that you have, right? I'm only half Jamaican, so I only have half as many jobs. And the importance of defining ourselves. There's a saying that it's not what they call you, it's what you answer
Mm.
to, and how we define ourselves. And today, I'm defining myself as a faith builder, a fire starter, and a front runner, right? And in
Mm.
that theme, Joe, as you introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, why you do it, and how you're defining yourself today.
Wow. Hey, good morning, brothers. And Shawn, thank you for the invitation to be with you, Stephen and Mike. This is Mission Fuel, man. When we get together, even though, I haven't met Mike and Stephen before, just our few minutes in the back before we started
Yes.
connected us in very authentic ways. You know what I mean? You don't need a script for this, right? And so I'm Joe Jones, founder and CEO of the Center for Urban Families in Baltimore. And our mission basically is to dismantle poverty. Our tagline is helping fathers and families work. And that is on the facade of our building. And the reason why I point that out Often, when we think about work in the context of family, it connotes support to women and children. And often, fathers are not included or marginalized. And so, for us, we wanted to make sure on the facade of the building, this moniker would be there. So, as men in the community, fathers walked by, they could take a peep at a building they knew intentionally connoted engagement and inclusion of them. And so, for me, the work has been all around strengthening families, recognizing that dads play a critical role with moms in raising our nation's children. And too many of our children fall through the cracks without having a connection to the identity that's created by a mom and a dad. And so that's, sort of like the spirit behind the work. But it's also about connecting folks to the world of work and careers. And what does that mean over time? And a recent recognition for us, particularly with some folks we've been working with who are now homeowners. We had a guy who died, and as he was transitioning, a dad who died, as he was transitioning, he had become an entrepreneur. He started his own business. He purchased a home. And so, like, as his 11th hour heading to his 12th hour, he said, "Man, I don't have a will." And it freaked us out, man. So we reached out to our legal partners. One of our partners went down to the hospital, did his estate planning, transferred everything over to his daughter. His daughter has her own home, right? And her daughter is 25. So the granddaughter now has her grandfather's home. So this notion of intergenerational wealth in communities of color is a driving force, behind what we do. So when you ask me, what is driving me today, I'm a pusher. Right? Different connotation today than yesterday.
I love
right? But pushing systems, pushing policy, pushing people to believe that there's a different way you can invest in communities of color, and the return on investment is a stable society.
Sir, I'm like, can we get some Curtis Mayfield here? Right? And so thank you for that, Joe. And that notion of reframing, some of us from back in the day, when we think of pusher, we think of something different, right? And sometimes I'm a pusher too, right? I like to push folks into the deep end, right? Folks that are kind of hanging out at the edge of the.
Hey, Shawn, you a pusher to the extreme. Let's be real clear with the audience, right? This ain't your general push. This is like, with rocket fuel.
And this brother that I'm introducing is also a fellow pusher, right? And got to be careful what I say around him, because I will get a text. You said you were going to do this. We need you. Time to rise up and push it, right? And we need folks like that in our lives. And so I want to bring to the screen, to the stage, to the mic, my good brother, Mike Dorsey. Let the Trailblazer audience know who you are, what you do, and why you do it, and how you're defining yourself today.
Well, first, brothers, this is such an amazing opportunity to step on this platform with you all and share a little bit about what I have going on, but more importantly, share with the world what's flowing through us, because the reality is this: it's not me, it's what's flowing through me, right? And so when I think about the whole concept of, the vessel, a lot of people talk about being the vessel, right? I'm a vessel, I'm capturing this, I'm capturing that. But I've had to reframe that in my life and realize that I'm not a vessel, but I'm a tube, and the thing about being a tube is that things flow through a tube. But when you become a tube, you don't have a bottom. So therefore you have nothing to catch, right? So you have to have enough faith as you operate that the faucet's never going to get turned off, that everything that's coming in is going to keep coming in because you're constantly pushing it out. And so when I take a step back and look at my life, and, I'm a personal development coach, and I really specialize in helping brothers, high capacity brothers, identify who they are, but then also pull those things inside of them out so they can then operate in a way that they impact the world and gain full fulfillment in their life. But then also they don't subject other people to having to deal with a lesser form of who they are. But what I've come to realize is high capacity brothers, high capacity people operate as tubes. They don't have any faith that they don't have a lack of faith that the faucet's going to get turned off. So they don't worry about trying to capture everything. When it comes in, they let it flow out. But the thing is, as a tube, that tube becomes stronger and becomes more fortified as more flows through it. right? And so that's why I challenge brothers, I challenge individuals, I challenge anybody that I come into contact with is to not be a vessel, because you don't benefit anybody else until you're full. And really at that point, until somebody either kicks you over or you spill over, everything gets captured inside of you. That's not how we're designed. We're designed to connect. You know, it's amazing that all four of us are on this platform together. We're connecting, right? We're sharing, we're becoming better by listening to each other share our stories. And so for me, I'm the creator of Black Fathers Now, the podcast. I interview brothers from all over the world, high capacity brothers that are doing the doggone thing, some on a public stage, some just within their families. But the reality is they all have insight, inspiration, and wisdom designed to help somebody else glean something from that to then apply to their life. And the title is Black Fathers Now, because now is the thing that we have control over. You know, what's past is water under the bridge. What's to come is unknown, right? Now is the present, and the present's a gift that we have to unwrap. And so I'm a personal development coach, creator of Black Fathers Now, entrepreneur, but most importantly, you know, I'm connected to the Father above, and I have a direct line through the Holy Spirit to be able to do things that are amazing. But I'm the husband, and I'm the husband to my beautiful wife, Maisha, and I'm the father to my young ones, Morgan and Maxwell. So outside of that, man, that's who I am. Let's make this thing happen.
Wow. That's a lot, right? And so tell us about, we're going to stick with you for a second there, Mike. Okay. The genesis of Black Fathers Now. And you're manifesting what Stephen Hart is manifesting, the mantra of we have to become masters of our own media, tell our own stories, control our own narrative. But that just didn't happen overnight. But what was the seed, the genesis of this entrepreneurial vision that you have? How did it happen?
Man, you know, I'll tell you, man, when you take a step back and you really take a full inventory of everything that you've been blessed with, everything that you've been gifted, it takes a while to get there, especially, you know, if you have degrees and you've worked with organizations and, you know, you've been in different places or in different circles. It takes a while for you to really understand that you're truly gifted with everything needed and or necessary to make the impact in the world that you're designed to make. Right. And so for me, it was interesting. What kind of pushed me over the edge was when I got laid off as a pharmaceutical rep a few years ago. You know, that was kind of like this kick in the pants to just say, you know what, Mike, you have everything that you need, just walk. Right. And, you know, and then over this time is interesting. You know, I read a book years ago called The Alchemist. And, you know, The Alchemist talks about as you pursue your personal legend, the universe, for me, is the creator of the universe conspires to help you along on your journey. Right. And as you start to walk, things start to open up. And so for me, throughout the years, I've been doing this personal development work. But then all of a sudden, when the layoff happened, you come to realize that, dude, you have everything here. Let's step out here and just put it out and see what happens. And so little by little things started coming into place as I started walking. And then you end up getting to a point in which you have, you know, access to brothers like Shawn Dove, Joe Jones, and Stephen A. Hart on, you know, an international stage to share a message which is geared towards empowering, pouring into, and inspiring, you know, Black men to be the best versions of who they are.
And I love that. And we're going to come to you, Joe, describing how a moment of adversity, a moment of a setback, you got laid off, right? And that's a powerful pivot moment in your story, right? And we talk about what can the world learn from Black fathers, right? And what can the world learn specifically from Mike Dorsey and Joe Jones? What I'm hearing is, you know, whatever is your setback or where you might have fallen, or where you may feel that you're broken, you can build wherever you're broken, right? And I know Joe's story, right? And we share similar stories of bouncing back from deep adversity, being on the edge and the platform. And Joe, I'm just so inspired by your story. Tell us about, because you didn't wake up and be a national leader, social entrepreneur, a model of the Center for Urban Families in Baltimore. Talk about your seeds of the beginnings and your adversity and how you bounce back from that.
Yeah, thanks, Sean, and Mike. Thanks for that. Unpacking that and that that imagery of the tube, because I can definitely see being engaged in that as a vehicle and not thinking about what the obstacles are, but thinking about what the opportunities are. I wish I could tell people there was actually a vision for the center. Now, at some point, there was like a business plan, but prior to then, it was, I had come out of my own personal struggles, being connected to the drug game, incarceration, largely I associated with when my mother and father divorced. And I fell into that deep abyss, and it was really a struggle to get out of it. And not unlike some of our young brothers who don't think that they've got a future on this earth, I felt the same way. But through a series of supports and interventions, I was able to, get my footing, and took a few menial jobs. But then I ended up at the Baltimore City Health Department, working in maternal and child health, working with pregnant moms. And it was working with those pregnant moms, I realized those moms were pregnant by a guy, right? But the health department had no recognition of that. And I basically grew up at the Baltimore City Health Department. It's the place that gave me a chance. And I felt this allegiance and this loyalty to the health department. But I also was struggling with the fact that the work that I cared about was embedded in public health. And public health didn't see the work that I was doing around fatherhood and connecting fathers and their partners to the world of work as being core to their mission. And so with that backdrop, I began to think about what I wanted to do next. But I also felt inferior because I had this criminal background. I was a recovering addict and my stuff was public. And so who would actually give me a chance? So I felt kind of safe and comfortable within an environment at the health department, but I was also struggling to stay within that cocoon, if you will. And eventually I got this sense that, and there were some other factors, back home that I was struggling with. And I said, blind faith, I've got to do this. And I was nervous. My knees were shaking every time I was ready to submit that resignation letter. And lo and behold, once I made that decision and I stepped out and had to have the necessary conversation, the mayor supported me, the health commissioner supported me in the ways in which I did not truly anticipate. But what I will say is I put the grind in beforehand. Right. I wasn't a loose cannon. I had to make some calculated risks, but I wanted to do it within the framework of having people believe it was for the right purpose. And from that, the center was created in 1999 to the point where the health commissioner served on my board at the beginning, and so just thinking about not necessarily having all of the I's dotted and the T's crossed, but believing in your heart that you have something else to contribute and going out on blind faith, taking that calculated risk and doing what you believe you were ordained to do by God. And from that, things have blossomed over the years. And what people may not know, Sean, and I'm gonna give you your flowers right here. There was a point where our fatherhood work was not going to be able to continue because of other funding sources had dried up. And Shawn, in his role at the Open Society Foundation, created funding opportunities that was a lifeline to the center that allows us to continue to work around fathering today. And so I want people to understand these relationships, these networks, this ability to do brotherhood is critically important. And the world should know about the moniker that you place, the imprint you placed on the center. And, Shawn, we are now engaged in a body of work with some other practitioners around young fathers. And so it really comes full circle for me.
The bless. And I was to elevate the metaphor that Brother Mike Dorsey, I was just being in a tube, right? I was in the right place at the right time with some resources to invest. And it's really interesting when you talk about making choices. And when I joined the Campaign for Black Male Achievement, I was publishing a newspaper called Proud Papa, right? And elevating the stories of Black dads, right? And this whole notion that, the mainstream media presenting Black fathers and Black men as pimps, players, perpetrators, but never as proud papas, right? And so created this a publication, and that's how I got connected with you. And I remember the moment having to decide to take this job at Open Society Foundations and lead the Campaign for Black Male Achievement and put aside Proud Papa, right? And what I realized in retrospect, more than a decade later, I was able to do that, but then invest millions into the responsible fatherhood movement. And so you were one of our first grantees. And so it was a blessing to invest in you. And that's come back full circle and us continuing to work together, right? And so, Mike, I know at some point you're going to have Joe on your podcast, right?
100%, yes.
You know,
And
right?
Stephen, yes.
And Stephen, right? And this is the setup. And we talked about the power of relationships and talk about who blazed a trail for you, right? We're talking about trailblazers, right? Who blazed the trail for you to get where you are right now?
You know, I'll tell you, man, I literally live by that principle, the African proverb of it takes a village to raise a child, right?
Yes.
But in a lot of instances, we forget that grown men need villages as well, right? And the other part to it is that does not limit ourselves to just one source. So in a lot of instances, if you're open, if you're present, and we talked about that earlier, you know, with Black fathers now, if you're present, you come to realize that you have people who have blazed a path for you in so many different regards. If you just open your eyes and look, there have been people that have spoken on my behalf in rooms that I wasn't present in. There have been individuals who've written recommendation letters. You know, you go somewhere and you realize that somebody knows everything about you. They're like, hey, I talked to so-and-so and they told me everything that's going on about you. And it's such an amazing thing. And so it's really hard for me to stop and say this one individual, you know, blazed a path for me, because when I open my eyes, I come to realize I have paths in all different directions that are being blazed for me. And a lot of those are unbeknownst to me. See, that's the other part to it. It's like when you're walking in the direction that you're supposed to walk in, and you know, I'm kind of reframing the whole concept of grind and really making it more about being aligned. Because when you're aligned, then you don't really have to grind per se. You have to work. You have to put in effort, but you don't necessarily have to grind because you're aligned with the purpose. And so for me, when I think about those that have blazed the path for me, you know, I can think about my parents. I can think about my grandparents. I mean, I can even go as far back as thinking about my great grandparents. I had a conversation with my uncle the other day, and I said, you know, I looked at my great grandparents, all 8 of my great grandparents. All 8 of my great grandparents were married until death.
Wow.
All 4 of my grandparents were married until death. My parents are married to this day. So what I'm saying, what I want to say by that is nobody's perfect. Now everybody got their own issues. We all got our own challenges and things we struggle with on a daily basis. But that framework of the importance of family goes back multiple generations. And that blazed a trail for me, because what's interesting, my brothers and I, all 3 of us, we're all married, and we're all married to women whose parents are still married to this day as well. And we didn't purposefully seek that. Right. So it's like these things that get downloaded into us that trailblaze, you know, for us, even when we don't even know things are being trailblazed for us. Right. Influence our actions. And sometimes it's not until after you go through it, in hindsight being 2020, you look backward and you realize like, whoa, that trail was blazed for me. And when we look at the foundation of what we're looking to do with Black fatherhood, a lot of that foundation starts with that union and with that solid connection with mom and dad. And so it's just interesting how all of that informed where I am to this day. And so I would actually put not an individual person, but the actions 3 generations ago would set the stage for where I am right now. And again, nobody's perfect, because I'm far from perfect, but perfection is not a requirement for greatness.
I love that you hit on this, Mike. You're sparking so much thought for me, even in this moment, right? As many of you know, I'm Jamaican, you know, moved here 28 years ago. But it was, and my dad is probably 10 feet from here listening to this conversation right now. I have an amazing father who's done, his part in this journey, but there are people in his village. We're talking about it takes a village, right, to support a father. It took his village. It took one of his best friends seeing me at a very critical point as a 16-year-old that was somewhat lost to say, you know what? Stay here in the States. Let me help you out. He was a dean at a community college and got me anchored into, staying here, getting into school and moving me in the right direction. 2 years later, Dr. Sam Wright at USF, right? Like I had no idea where Tampa was on a map, right? Dr. Sam Wright came down and met me at an event in South Florida and said, hey, I'm a bless you, and gave me a scholarship to come to USF. Brought me to Tampa, where I lived for 12 years of my life, before meeting my wife. And so, and I'm not, Mike, bless you. That's amazing that you come from generations of families that remain together. I'm from a divorced, family. My dad and mom divorced when I was probably 7. But again, it for those listening, maybe you're not in Mike's shoe, right, where you have that blessing, but you do have the support of, that village. And that's something that I might need to reach out to Dr. Wright and my uncle today, and bless him. But
those stories are so important, right? And even if our stories are different, we can derive some mission fuel from their stories, right? And
exactly.
I never woke up. My mother and father were not married. I never woke up one day to say, good morning, dad, right? And it wasn't until years later, understanding the story, right? And no one is perfect, right? But I remember a significant moment in my fatherhood journey. I have 4 children, Nia, Maya, Cameron, and Caleb. And my twin boys, Cameron and Caleb, they were around maybe 4 years old. And it was the middle of the night, a thunderstorm, right? And it was thundering, and Cameron, about 2 o'clock in the morning, is calling for his father, right? He's scared, right? And 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, God, why isn't he calling for mommy? Right? Why he calling, calling for me, right? And so I got up, I went into his room and, ushered him back to sleep, and he went back to sleep. And I went back to my room. I laid down in the bed, and then it hit me. I was like, wow, what is that like, Shawn, to call your father in the middle of the night and for him to come? And in that moment, I said, you know what? You may not have had that for whatever reason that was, but you're going to be that for your children, right? And you are that for your children. And so some of this is, we may not have this generational line of power and presence and fathering, but so much of your work, Joe, is this ending the generational poverty and building anew. And I want you to just to talk a little bit about that and what the world needs to know about the work that you're doing to build sometimes when we're broken.
Man, immediately comes to mind. I'm a respond in the frame of a story, right? So Ralph is one of our fatherhood graduates from back in the day. A couple of months ago, Ralph calls me out of the blue. I haven't talked to Ralph in years, right? Ralph calls me and said, man, I'm calling you to give you your flowers now, right? I'm like, dude, what you talking about, right? So we kicking him back and we reminiscing. So fast forward, Ralph now owns his own rig, right? He does, transportation across the country. He's got a house down in Atlanta. And he took me back when he first connected, and he's around 23, 24 years old, right? And Ralph and I, Ralph's, he was a tall, thin guy, sharp. You could take him anywhere. He could represent, So I'm taking Ralph with me up on Capitol Hill, and we're going to engage with then Senator Obama and Senator Evan Bayh, who had joined together on this fatherhood legislation, right? So we going up to Capitol Hill. We're about to go through, right? Now, keep in the back of your mind, think about January 6th, right? We're going up to Capitol Hill. And right before we get ready to go through the door, Ralph said, "Hey, Mr. Joe." I said, What's up, Ralph? He said, "Man, I need to talk to you for a minute." So we peeled to the side. He said, "Man, I got my blade on me." I'm like, "Ralph, what?" Right. So we had to ease back, trying to, be nondescript, and stashed it on the side, right? So we go in, and we're in there. We're in this room, this holding room, with Senator Bayh, waiting on Senator Obama to come. And Senator Bayh, he's getting familiar, and I've known him a little bit, so I introduced him to Ralph, and he and Ralph are talking, and he asked something Ralph about his kids. So Ralph said, "Yeah, I've got two daughters, right? And they're both the same age, right?" So Senator Bayh said, "Oh, I have twins too, right? How old are your twins?" Ralph said, "Well, I don't have twins," right? So he had two women pregnant at the same time, right?
Oh, wow.
And it took the senator like about an hour to figure out that Ralph. So the context of that is, my response is, as complicated as Ralph's life was then, the power of the intervention over time, where he could call me years later, he's an entrepreneur, owns his own home, and his kids are like college grads. You know what I mean? So that's the kind of stuff, man, that people just don't have an appreciation for. They create this narrative is, you've never been, you never will. Right. And that is our obligation and responsibility to reframe that narrative about, just because you were doesn't mean you stay there, and you get a chance to do this thing too. And I'll throw out, a little bit of a moniker, which is a plug for the book, Shawn. They too, or I too am America.
On loving and leading Black men and boys, and when we talk about mission fuel, and both you and Mike are entrepreneurs. Joe, you're a social entrepreneur. You talked about the building that you have in West Baltimore, which that capital campaign. I remember being there for the grand opening, right? And so part of the Trailblazer they're all Trailblazers, right? Our audience, and some are professionals within organizations, some are entrepreneurs, and some are like, okay, do I make this leap? And in this moment of the pandemic, or in a moment of transition, and talk a little bit. And we'll come to you after Joe, Mike, about some of your principles of social entrepreneurship, right? I just tuned in, right, and I want to be like Mike and Joe. And how did you build the Center for Urban Families? And if there were three things, if someone's thinking about, launching out, what three things? I know it's hard to narrow it down to three, but what mission fuel would you share for the Trailblazers that are watching?
For me, at the very top of the list is this faith in God and a sense of integrity that can never be compromised, right? That has to drive you, particularly for folks who come from backgrounds where, you've had past discretions, right? You don't get a chance to get a do-over again, right? And so if you really want to contribute to the work that uplifts families and Black men and Black boys, our commitment to a God of our understanding, whoever you decide is, you're driving in that vehicle, and a sense of integrity. Number two is, like, if I want to win championships, I'm picking Michael Jordan. I'm picking Steph. I'm picking LeBron. The 12th man on the bench is a good dude, but he ain't the one I'm looking for on my team, not as a starter, right? So I'm looking to build a team that's much smarter than me, that has an alignment for the vision for what's possible, that believes in people of color can achieve, right? And have the competency and the skills, and want to build a bench that is associated with their respective responsibilities, so integrity, that faith thing, that sense of having a competent team. And the other thing is create opportunities for the brothers and the sisters who we want to support. So a core value of us at the center as it relates to our staff, we have about 28, 30, full-time people within the organization currently, includes our, we refer to, some people refer to people as clients, students. We refer to folks, service beneficiaries, as members. So we have folks on our team, right, who are former members who earned the right to get a shot, not earned the right to get on the team. They earned the right to get a shot to get on the team. They had to compete, right, against everybody else, and they graded on top. And so creating opportunities for folks to be a part of the team that come from the mud, if you will, is central for me. Is those three things I would put out there.
Man, whew, Lord, you drop some gems, brother. And it's interesting when someone that drops gems, you got to figure out a way to, okay, how can I drop a gem or two so that we have this full-on tennis bracelet of gems? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But when I think about three things, I would say simply faith, identity, and action. Right. And so when you come back and you start and you think about faith, like Brother Joe mentioned, I had a conversation with a brother when I was doing a speaking engagement, and they were doing a Bible study before I got in to talk. And he said something to me that stuck with me, but it resonated. He said, Mike, I'm coming to realize that sometimes we're all Jesus and not enough Holy Spirit. And I was just like, ooh, this is interesting, because when you think about, because he said, Mike, think about it. What did Jesus do? He came and did his thing. Now he's sitting at the right hand of the Father, but who do you have access to right now? And I was just like, ooh, the Holy Spirit. And when we realize that we're directly connected with the Holy Spirit, when we realize that we have 100% access to that, and we have faith in that, then what ends up happening is we now have the power to do things that are, because Jesus even said we have the power to do things even greater with faith, right? So it like stuck with me, and I'm just like, yes, we got to have Jesus, but we also need to make sure we don't deny the Holy Spirit, because that's the action that we need to take. So I first would say for all of us, it starts with faith, then it's identity. One of the things that I'm understanding with not just brothers, but anybody, and this is not just in the United States, but across the world, most of us struggle with identity. Most of us struggle with who we are, because if you're in corporate spaces, what you come to realize is you've been beat down for so long that you've gotten chipped away at, right? It's like somebody whittling away at who you are and coming to, and basically you now just have a shell of who you have the capacity to be, because the world has beat you down. Life has beat you down. And because of that, you no longer have the confidence to look in the mirror and say that, what, I am enough. So we have to really take a step back and really affirm each other. But then we got to get to the point in which we have the confidence to affirm ourselves so that we can ultimately establish a firm identity. Because once you get your identity, then you can really understand the alignment that you have in this world, and you can start to flow. There's a difference between work and flow. If you think, I think Shawn and I, you and I talked about this. If you think about the whole concept of work, the definition of work is force times distance, right? That equals work. Force times distance equals work. But if you take a step back and you really look at force is a push or a pull against something. So what if you're no longer forcing something, but you're flowing with it? It's no longer work, because it's been totally redefined, because you're no longer pushing or pulling against it. And that comes from you first having an identity, but then establishing an alignment with what it is you're supposed to do. Never stay in your place, always stay in your lane. A place is static. A lane, you're continuously moving, right? And then finally, it's all about action. So like Brother Joe mentioned, putting a team together, dream team is what everybody should be striving for. We want Hall of Famers at every position in every scenario that we're doing, right? We want to create this model, right? This connectivity of brothers and sisters and people in general who are doing the doggone thing. But action, whatever action needs to be taken, have the confidence and the courage to take that action in the moment so that you can then move forward. And I promise you, everything falls in place the way that it's supposed to. Not always the way that you want it to, but the way that it's supposed to. Faith, identity, action.
That's a mission fuel right there, right?
Yes.
And wow. So, I've been marinating in this song by Jonathan McReynolds and Mally Music called Adulting, right? and the song begins. I woke up this morning, and the thing that I was overwhelmed by was exactly the thing that I wanted. And Joe, we were on a conversation yesterday with leaders in the fatherhood movement, and we were talking about the balancing of being dads, husbands, running organizations, and having a vision. And earlier, Mike was talking about grinding, right? We want to get that out of our lexicon. And I want us to lift up health, healing, and well-being, right? Because as we are building, as we are elevating our faith, our identity, and our action, our mission field gets low. What do we do to address our health, healing, and well-being?
Whew, man. You know, I remember a conversation we were having. I can't remember if it was at one of the Rumble events or another conversation associated with Rumble, where we were talking about soldiers in the work transitioning with the gloves on. They never get a chance to take the gloves off. And, you know, so much of what we grapple with in community, because we know some of the structural inequities that exist in communities of color that have been created, they have been maintained, they've been nurtured to keep us from starting at the starting point. We're always starting from behind, which means we're always in this process of being resilient. And it is hard on the soul to be resilient, to have to be resilient all the time. You know, it's as if you're in a car and you're accelerating at 100 miles an hour and you never ever get the benefit of putting your foot on the brake to slow things down. And that is, for me, I believe it shaves minutes, it shaves hours, days, weeks off of our life expectancy. And that's why you can see in a community like Baltimore, where the center is located, a 20-year difference in life expectancy from a community that's not of color, but only 10 minutes away from where the center is. And so I think
I'm sorry, Joe, can you please repeat what you just said about the lifespan?
A 20-year difference in life expectancy in a community of color in Baltimore that's 10 minutes away from another community that's not of color. And I'll give you an example embedded in that. In the corridor in northern Pennsylvania, where the CVS was burned and looped in the media as if the whole city was on fire, associated with the uprising around the death of Freddie Gray, right? There are a host of check cashing places, right, up and down that corridor. There's no full service bank. Right. In that community I talked about, where the life expectancy is 20 years different, right? 10 minutes away, there are 6 separate full service banks in a 2-block radius. Right. Those are some of the inequities that lead us to being housing insecure, food insecure, which then plays into our health, right? Our physical health, our psychological health, and it makes it incredibly difficult for us to spend time pulling away. This is full-time work with 2 part-time jobs, and all 3 of them require overtime, right? And when you don't take time to pull away, I mean, just the conversation yesterday, without breaching confidentiality, the conversations we were having with Black men in the work who are now thinking about what this means to support externally, but to support within our own families. And so this dichotomy that we have to juggle, that we don't often get a chance to articulate, and we don't have community established enough where Black men can come together and release and force us to answer the question, what does health mean? What does healing mean? What does well-being mean? And to put some intentional things. Now, the last thing I'll say, Shawn, one of the things I benefited from the most about Rumble, and I can't remember the sister's name, who you had in there, had us on the floor doing breathing exercises.
Dr. Phyllis Hubbard.
Dr. Phyllis Hubbard. Right? That intentionality was something that I think all of us took for granted until we were in an environment that was conducive enough for us to let go and have somebody orient us and take us through that process.
And before we go to you, for those that are like, what are they talking about? Rumble, Rumble, what is that, right? And There's an annual gathering that the Campaign for Black Male Achievement used to hold at the Muhammad Ali Center called Rumble, Young Man Rumble, an intergenerational gathering of men and women, young and old, in the movement of Black Male Achievement, when we would come together to celebrate ourselves. It was not a conference, a convening, it was more like a revival. And I remember specifically, I think it was Rumble 5. It was an intergenerational closing on the last day. Susan L. Taylor and Reverend Wyatt were facilitating, and the question came up around depression. And these are leaders in the movement. How many folks are dealing with depression? More than half of the room raised their hands. And then they asked, how many have thought about suicide in the last 3 months? And we looked around and we were shocked at how many hands were still up. And we realized that we have to, we're doing the work at the sacrifice of our own well-being. And Dr. Shawn Dove from San Francisco State University, a founder of Florist Agenda, and an author, and works in the healing and creating healing-centered spaces, says the first act of social justice is self-care. Right. And in that moment, in that rumble, we launched BMA Health and Healing Strategies to address the health, healing, and well-being of leaders like us on this call, leaders that are listening in. But I'm going to turn it over to you, Mike, and just talk a little about the health, healing, and well-being. I got my eye on the clock, Stephen, and there's another question I want to ask before we turn it over to you to put a bow on this gift that we're giving ourselves today.
Absolutely. And as I jump into this, man, Shawn, when you mentioned the concept of self-care, as brothers, a lot of times we believe that it's selfish to take care of yourself, right? But I've come to understand that it's actually selfish to not take care of yourself, because then what you're doing is you're allowing a lesser form of who you are to be put out into the world. And somebody who needs the full magnitude of Stephen, of Shawn, and of Joe is not getting that when we don't take care of ourselves. And so therefore, how many lives are not being impacted because I'm only allowing a shell of myself to get put out there? So fellas listening, it's selfish to not take care of yourself. Let's keep that in our mind. As we talk about the concept of health, healing, and well-being, and we talk about environment, there's a new study in medicine or in wellness, and it's called epigenetics. And epigenetics is basically the gene expression influenced by your environment. And so it literally plays into what Joe was talking about, in which our environments influence our gene expression. So all the trillions of genes that are in our bodies, these things express themselves relative to the environments that we're exposed to. And so for us, if you're doing significant work, if you're in challenging environments, you have to take care of yourself. You have to balance that thing off to an extent, or else your genes are going to start to express, reflecting that trauma, reflecting everything that's going on. And so that's why, to your point, you can be 10 minutes away in a nurturing, loving, supportive, affirming environment, and the genes in your body will express themselves differently. You can pick up and move somewhere else, and all of a sudden it's a different thing going on with the same person, right? So we have to be very mindful of, yes, our genetic history, our environmental impacts, but then also our own personal well-being, and being aware enough to realize when things are not in alignment, so that we can then take measures to put them back in alignment. And so I listened to, it was interesting, not too long ago, and I'll wrap my little segment up because I know we got to get towards the end. I was listening to KRS-One give a definition of wealth. And somebody said, well, KRS-One, how would you define wealth? And he said, wealth is the intersection of health and well-being. And I was just like, man, that was brilliant. That is how I think about it. And that is what we need to focus on from a cornerstone perspective that we need to build upon as we move forward.
And so, Mike, from one podcaster to another, and the another is our brother Stephen A. Hart, right? And Joe, we're going to come to you. And Stephen is one of the most given, generous, thoughtful brothers that I know. And on Monday's podcast, what I love about him is the sharing of the vulnerability of carrying it all, right, and leading and being a caregiver for his dad and husband and father. What mission field would you directly pour into Stephen A. Hart right now in his vision and his journey as a husband, a father, a son, an entrepreneur?
Well, Stephen, brother, I'm going to tell you first to keep going, right? Don't stop unless there's something inside of you that says you need to pivot, but you're never going to stop, because the moment that you stop is the moment that you no longer exist. So I would encourage you to continue to go. You're impacting lives. You're making a difference. And it's not necessarily just in your immediate family. You're making a difference in anybody that's touched by anybody that touches your family. Right. So a lot of times we think that the impact that we have is limited based off of maybe the download numbers or the metrics or the whatever. But we don't realize that there's somebody who knows somebody, who's connected with somebody, who's heard of somebody, who's come across something that you've had. And you've got this degree of separation that is very minimal or is reduced because of that. And so I would say, with your heart, with your spirit, and it's ironic, your last name is Hart too, right? Yeah. With your heart, with your spirit, but most importantly with the actions, because a lot of times we struggle in life to make our words and our actions map together. And what I see from you, from our interactions, what I've observed and listened to from your conversations, from what I know about you, from those that have talked about you when you are not present, is that your words and your actions map together, and we need more of that. So I will encourage you to continue to walk in purpose, to not be detracted. I heard something recently, is another African proverb. It says, a lion doesn't turn around when a small dog is barking, right? So any of these small dogs that start barking, unless those small dogs need help, see, we got to add something to that. Unless those small dogs need help, I'm going to encourage you to continue walking, brother, because you are that lion.
I receive all of that, brother Mike.
Wait, before you got some more to receive, right? We still got a little bit
I receive that.
To shower some more mission fuel, because as y'all are splashing or pouring mission fuel on Stephen, it's splashing on me, right? So I'm in proximity and I'm getting some of that. And I'm going to ask Joe to take a second or two to do the same.
Yeah, two things, Brother Stephen. And this first one is not informed by anything I know about you personally, right? It's a journalist comment, right? So when people get this twisted, under no circumstances should you not do everything to maintain that household, that relationship with the people who are there, who look at you, who need you, and the presence that you exude that's come across since I've only gotten to know you this morning, before we came on live, and since, is that you have this incredible ability to be thoughtful about your origins. You mentioned Jamaica. I'm not from Jamaica, but I've been there, right? So I really appreciate that connection. But that whole concept of family and making sure that's tight, and that the pressures to maintain the material things, including our careers, is in no way should we substitute that for what's necessary to keep our families intact. And that's basically for all of us, myself included. And then the last thing is, man, you've got this incredible platform. You are helping people to think through branding as a means to uplift our communities. And whatever it takes to build on that platform that you currently have, what additional competencies do you need to acquire? People do you need to associate to take your platform to the next level, whatever that next level is for you? Pursue it with all vigor, and don't be afraid to reach out to folks and snatch their time to help you get there.
I receive all of it right now, receiving all of it right now. And it aligns so well with my thoughts this morning. We were in a text thread before we got going this morning, and I shared with you guys, I was opening the studios last night. My wife and I talking, and she has a 7 a.m. and an 8 a.m. meeting this morning, and our kids need to be dropped off at 7:40 for school, and we have this 8 o'clock live. And I said, the 2 words that keep my marriage intact. Yes, dear. I'll get the kids to school. I get the kids to school, and I got them up this morning. I helped get them fed, helped get them, ready out the door earlier than we normally would. Drove through the fog, got them dropped off. Message you guys, hey, I'll be in the studio, before we go live, right? And I'm cutting through all kind of school buses and driving like a Jamaican to get back here from at 8 a.m. And, Shawn always touches on it. While I know that the blessing of the gifts you guys shared this morning will impact so many who will listen to or watch this video across all the platforms, the impact for each of us starts at home. And I think in many ways, many of us touched on this before. And actually, before you even said anything, I put this in as a banner. And it's this. Your presence is greater than your presence, right? We need to provide. Many of us have experienced the need to put food on the table. And that sometimes is the fuel to do the things that, pressure bust pipes, right? I talked about this on Monday, an experience pretty much not having income coming into Christmas of 2013 and not being able to put food on the table or support my wife or buy a Christmas gift. But that experience was the fuel. I was bawling in my car, right, that day. And I was like, this will never happen again. And, God bless, I've never had that experience again, right? But being a father sometimes fuels, that next step that we have to make to put food on the table. But let's never mistake the importance of being present, right? This morning, telling my kids, I have a morning affirmation with my son in the car or before he leaves the house if his mom's dropping him off. To be able to do that, it touches on what Shawn said, earlier, right? Like, we just need to always remember the priority, one, as dads, is to be there, is to guide, is to protect. They're always going to gravitate to their mama, right? If me and my wife are jokingly, in a fight, everybody jumps on me like, don't touch my mama, right? But, just always making sure that they know that, we are there for them. That's the word I want to impart to everybody as we wrap. Listen, Blazer Nation, I want some emoji hand claps for Brother Mike and Brother Joe. Drop some claps up in the comments as you're leaving today. I would just love, we have a minute here, so just a couple quick seconds. If each of you, including Shawn, could share one action that our Blazer Nation can take this week that's going to help them to blaze their trail. I'll start with you, Mike.
One action they can take, honestly, is just to take action, right? I mean, I'm going to encourage everyone in the Blazer Nation to take action. Find one thing that you can take action on, no matter how big or how small it may be. Find one thing that you can take action on today, not next week, not whatever. What's one thing that you can take action on today? Actually, you know what? Forget it. I want you to find one thing you can take action on within the next 30 minutes. Whatever it is, whether it's a call, a text, something, take action on something within the next 30 minutes and just start that trajectory and start that snowball rolling. And that's it. Like, we're going to keep it simple. Take action on something in the next 30 minutes, no matter how big or how small it is. Challenge yourself to do so.
Yeah, and I'll build on Mike and ask people to get slightly granular. Walk your behind in the bathroom where there's a mirror. Stand in front of that mirror. Make a commitment to yourself. Look yourself in the eye. make that commitment that Mike just talked about and act on it as a commitment to yourself. Nobody else has to know about it, right? This is a commitment between you and yourself, and take that kind of commitment. Because when you look yourself in the eye and you let yourself down, the next time you go to that bathroom and you look in that mirror, it's really difficult to hold your eyes up and look at yourself, right? That's my one thing to build off of Mike.
And along those lines, I would say, as you're making that commitment, decide what you're not going to do. Right? What is it on your list that you're trying to do and you want to do? What are you willing to give up in order to get what you want? Decide what you're not going to do and what you're going to sacrifice.
I love it. I love it. Listen, everybody, go out, pre-order Shawn's book.
Yes.
I Too Am America. Make sure
Coming next month.
You are hopping over to doveswords.com, grabbing a copy. Listen, thank you all very much. You have no idea. I'm having an incredibly difficult week, and this just blessed my soul this morning. Shawn, thank you as always for leading these conversations, bringing together people in a way that only you, that's your superpower, man. And I'm blessed to have you on these Wednesday lives. Join us back here next Wednesday. I don't know who we have in next week, Shawn, but
Gerald Moore, brother Gerald Moore, who's doing phenomenal work, creating a space and introducing Black boys to the field of STEM and technology. So he's a dynamo.
Yes.
He's in DC. And so Gerald Moore will be with us next Wednesday.
I love it. Blaze Nation, go out, go rise above, go way beyond, and keep blazing your trail. Have a great day.
Have a blessed one.